scent of freshly cooked afang soup, thick with native spices, periwinkle, shaki, meat, fish, palm oil, and other ingredients, filled the air of Ekpo Abasi Street. The most populated, bustling road in the heart of Calabar South was home to Unicross students, businesses, and vendors of all kinds. But none drew the crowd like Mamar Coco, the legendary cook whose food was whispered about from the edges of the city to the banks of the Calabar River. Mamar Coco's restaurant was small and unassuming, barely large enough to customers. Yet, every morning, the line stretched long before the first light of dawn. People arrived from all corners of the Calabar city, some with children strapped to their backs, others with tired eyes, clutching their plates as if they held something precious. The strange thing was that her customers always washed their own plates before handing them over for food. It was an unspoken rule, followed without question. The food, they all claimed, was worth it. Her Okon soup gives you strength for the whole day, said Etem, a fisherman who traveled miles from the riverbank just to get a bowl. My body feels lighter after eating her Ekpo Kukwo, whispered John, a Unicross lecturer who swore by the magic in Mamar Coco's food. Mamar Coco herself was a mystery. She was tall and wide-shouldered, with skin the color of rich earth. Her graying hair was always tied in a tight bun, and her eyes, sharp as razors, seemed to pierce through everyone. She spoke little, often grunting or nodding to her customers. But her food spoke volumes. It was rich, flavorful, and utterly irresistible. But beneath the praise and adoration, there were whispers. Dark whispers. It was said that Mamar Coco's food had a secret ingredient, something that no one else dared to use. Some claimed she was blessed by the ancestors, while others believed something far more sinister. The most disturbing rumor floated around like smoke from the fires that cooked her meals. That Mamar Coco used the water from dead bodies, collected from the old, abandoned mortuary at the edge of town along the new airport road. No one had proof, and most people laughed it off as town gossip. After all, how could something so delicious be tainted by something so horrifying? But as the line outside her restaurant grew longer, so did the rumors. Okon had lived on Ekpo Abasi Street all his life. His father had been a palm wine tapper, and his mother sold vegetables from a wooden cart near the Unicross gate. Now, at 22, Okon had taken over his mother's cart, though his eyes were often fixed on something else, the curious line that always gathered outside Mamar Coco's restaurant. Okon had never eaten there. He couldn't say why, but something about the woman unsettled him. He had seen how people behaved after eating her food, how their faces slackened in contentment, their eyes glazed over like they had tasted something otherworldly. It was almost as if they were under a spell. He'd heard the rumors too, of course. Everyone had, but no one seemed to care. They just wanted more of Mamar Coco's food. Okon, why don't you go there? Even once. Mamar Coco's food is a gift from the gods, his friend Fon teased one afternoon as they sat on the porch of his family's house. Okon shook his head. I don't trust her. Fon laughed. You're too suspicious. It's just food. Don't you see how happy everyone looks after they've eaten? Too happy, Okon replied, frowning. He had heard from some older men in the street about the abandoned mortuary at the edge of New Airport Road. It had been shut down years ago after a series of strange incidents. The bodies of the deceased would disappear, only to reappear days later in different parts of the town. The mortuary workers claimed to hear voices at night, whispers that echoed through the halls. It had been closed ever since, left to rot in the shadows. Yet, every now and then, someone claimed to see Mamar Coco near the building late at night, carrying large pots or buckets. Okon couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One rainy evening, Okon's curiosity got the better of him. He hadn't planned on joining the line outside Mamar Coco's store, but the smell of her food was too enticing. His stomach rumbled as he stood at the back of the line, clutching his mother's old plate in his hands. The rain drizzled lightly, and the sky was painted a deep gray. The line moved slowly, but no one complained. They simply waited, as if in a trance. When it was finally his turn, Okon stepped forward, handing Mamar Coco his plate. She glanced at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she recognized something in him. "You're new," she said in her low, gravelly voice. Okon nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yes, I've never eaten here before." Mamar Coco didn't respond. She took his plate and filled it with steaming Ekpo Abasi, the rich aroma wafting into his nostrils. Okon couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement. He had never smelled food like this before. There was something almost magical about it. He found a corner to sit in and took his first bite. The flavors exploded on his tongue, richer than anything he had ever tasted. The spices danced in his mouth, and for a moment, all his suspicions melted away. He understood now why people lined up every day, why they washed their plates and waited in silence for their turn. The food was perfect. But then, a strange sensation crept over him. As he swallowed the last bite, his mouth filled with a metallic taste, faint but undeniable. It was as if he had licked the edge of a rusty blade. Okon frowned, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. The food had tasted incredible, but that last bite left him unsettled. He pushed the thought aside and made his way back home, hoping to forget the strange taste. But he couldn't forget. That night, as he lay in bed, the metallic tang lingered in his throat. Sleep eluded him, and his mind raced with questions. The next morning, Okon was determined to find out the truth. He couldn't shake the feeling that Mamar Coco's food was tied to something darker, something he couldn't explain. And the more he thought about the rumors, the more he believed there was something to them. He needed to see the mortuary for himself. As dusk fell, Okon slipped away from his house, making his way to the edge of town. The road was empty, and the air was thick with humidity. The old mortuary loomed ahead, its windows shattered and its walls crumbling from years of neglect. The building was silent, abandoned, but not forgotten. Okon approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. The rumors about Mamar Coco and the mortuary echoed in his mind, and for a moment, he considered turning back. But then he heard something, a faint sound, like water sloshing in a bucket. He froze. Through the dim light, he saw a figure moving toward the mortuary's entrance. It was Mamar Coco. Okon ducked behind a tree, watching as she carried a large bucket into the building. His breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary cook's errand. Whatever Mamar Coco was doing here, it wasn't normal. When she disappeared inside, Okon crept closer. He peered through a crack in the broken door, his heart racing. Inside, Mamar Coco stood over a large basin filled with dark water. The smell that wafted from it was foul, like something rotting beneath the surface. Okon's stomach churned. The water wasn't just dirty, it smelled like death. Mamar Coco dipped her hands into the basin, stirring the water with a slow, deliberate motion. She muttered something under her breath, words that Okon couldn't understand. Then, with a swift motion, she poured the water into a large pot and began to stir it, adding herbs and spices from her basket. Okon's blood ran cold. This was it. This was the secret ingredient in Mamar Coco's food, the water from the dead. Okon's legs felt weak as he stumbled away from the mortuary. He couldn't believe what he had seen. The rumors were true. Mamar Coco was using the water from the dead to cook her food, and the people of Calabar South were unknowingly consuming it. He had to tell someone, but who would believe him? Mamar Coco's food was adored by everyone. They would never accept that she was capable of something so horrible. That night, as Okon lay in bed, the images of Mamar Coco stirring the foul water played over and over in his mind. He could still taste the metallic tang in his mouth, and it made him sick. But he couldn't stay silent. He had to find a way to stop her. The next day, Okon confided in Mfon. At first, his friend laughed it off, but as Okon described what he had seen, Mfon's expression grew serious. "You're not joking, are you?" Mfon asked, his voice low. "I wish I was," Okon replied. "We need to stop her." That evening, Okon and Mfon gathered a small group of trusted friends. They planned to confront Mamar Coco and expose her secret. It wasn't going to be easy, She had a powerful presence in the community, and they needed proof. Under the cover of darkness, they returned to the mortuary, hoping to catch Mamar Coco in the act. They hid in the shadows, waiting for her to arrive. Hours passed, and just when they thought she wouldn't come, they saw her. Mamar Coco moved silently, carrying her bucket of water as she had before. The group watched in horror as she repeated the ritual, stirring the death water into her cooking pot. But this time, they were ready. Just as Mamar Coco was about to leave, Okon stepped forward. "Mamar Coco," he called out, his voice steady despite the fear pounding in his chest. She froze, turning slowly to face him. Her eyes were dark, her expression unreadable. "You think you know everything, don't you?" Mamar Coco said, her voice low and dangerous. Okon's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "We know what you've been doing. We know about the water." Mamar Coco's lips curled into a cold smile. "And what will you do with that knowledge? Do you think anyone will believe you?" Word spread quickly after that night. The people of Ekpo Abasi Street were divided. Some refused to believe the rumors about Mamar Coco, while others began to avoid her stall altogether. But the spell had been broken. The truth was out, and Mamar Coco's power over the community began to fade. One evening, as the sun set over the street, Okon and his friends gathered outside Mamar Coco's stall. It was empty, the line of customers gone. "Mamar Coco," Okon called, his voice echoing in the stillness. "It's over." For a moment, there was no response. Then, slowly, the door to her shack creaked open, and Mamar Coco stepped out. She looked smaller now, her eyes tired and sunken. "You think you've won," she whispered. "But the dead never rest." Before anyone could react, a dark shadow rose from the ground beneath Mamar Coco, swirling around her like a storm. The group stepped back in fear, but Okon stood his ground. "This ends now," he said firmly. With a final scream, Mamar Coco collapsed to the ground, the shadow dissipating into the night. The days that followed were quiet. Mamar Coco's stall remained empty, her once thriving business now just a memory. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind blew through the streets of Ekpo Abasi, a faint smell lingered in the air, a smell of jollof rice and something far darker. And the people of Calabar South never forgot the tale of Mamar Coco, the cook who used death to feed the living. Watch out for the return of Mamar Coco.